3 disturbing truck driving horror stories. I've been a truck driver for a few months. I've seen some weird things. When I first took this job to be an over-the-road trucker, I thought it would be really exciting. I thought I'd get to travel the country and see the sights and come home with stories to tell my friends and family. I was right. This job is exciting, but I soon found that I'm better off not sharing these stories with anyone close to me. Not because I don't trust them, but because I'm worried they wouldn't believe me. Let me back up. My name is Brittany, I'm 22 years old, and I've been driving with a rather large company for a few months now, that I won't name, due to obvious reasons. Ever since my training ended and I got my own truck to start solo, I've seen some pretty weird things. When you're driving the loneliest road in America, yes, that's its real name, in the middle of nowhere, Nevada, things can start to get to you. I suppose it was only a matter of time before I saw something, out in the desert at nearly midnight. I still had another hour to the nearest truck stop, and blasting the freezing cold air against my face was all I could do to keep myself from dozing off at the wheel. Irresponsible, I know, but until you work this job you don't understand how much lax comes with it. I was driving this highway, in the desert, in the pitch blackness of a cold summer night, when suddenly something runs out in the road in front of me. Before I can even react, it's gone across the other side into the bushes. I barely got a good look at it, but I could have sworn it looked like a large, white dog, faster than any dog I've ever seen. I tried to just ignore it and keep driving. I see animals crossing the road at night all the time. It didn't seem like anything to get worked up about. Not even a minute later, I feel my truck lurch to the left and into the other lane. I quickly try to swerve and correct it, and easily step on the brake so I don't wreck. It can be easy to jackknife an 80,000-pound metal death machine. I slow it down and regain control. I look for the nearest pullover spot so I can see what the hell just hit my rig and see if there's any damage. Once I find a spot and turn off, hit my brakes and hop out, I walk around to the other side and see a large dent in the side of my trailer. What the fuck? Say to myself, as I walk over to inspect the side of the trailer. It's a huge dent, at least 5 feet wide and tall. No real shape to it, just a general dent. I can't imagine what could have hit me. My first thought was maybe a boulder rolled down from the side of the hill and smashed into me, but I didn't think I was driving next to any hills or mountains. As far as I knew, it was flat desert. I hear the sound of dirt crunching under footfall behind me and I turn around. My breath catches in my throat and my stomach drops as I see something standing not 50 feet away from me. It's large, menacing, and white. I can't even find the words to describe what this thing looked like. It looked like a very large dog, and that's a stretch. It stood on 2 short, stout legs, with long forearms reaching down past its knees. Its shoulders were broad and heaving, as if it had just ran a marathon. Its head was mostly shaped like a wolf, with a large snout filled with razor-sharp teeth bared in a snarl, saliva dripping from its maw. Its jet black eyes bore right through me, filled with hatred and hunger. I couldn't move, I was frozen in place. This creature stood between me and my only salvation, my truck. We stared at one another for a moment until I broke the silence. "You are one ugly motherfucker," I said. It snarled at me, then, very unexpectedly, it turned and walked away slowly using all 4 of its limbs, receding into the bushes and into the night. I stood there for what felt like several minutes, wondering if it would jump out and feed on my flesh at any moment. It never came back. I ran around the front of my truck and jumped inside, locking the door quickly and flooring it, as fast as you can floor an 18-wheeler, which is not at all, Soon I was back on the highway and barreling down it as if my life depended on it. For a while it felt like it did. Within a half hour I found myself at the truck stop and shut down for the night. Sleep was difficult that night, was certain every noise I heard was that damn creature returning. Luckily, the night went on without another incident. If I remember correctly, it was a week or so before Halloween. I had a trip that took me down to Laredo, Texas, which is right near the border of Mexico. I've been there a few times before, but not this late. I got to my destination around 5 p.m., and if you've ever been to Laredo, you'll know it's in the middle of bumfuck nowhere, so I had to drive a good distance out of the way to find a truck stop. My next load was taking me out of town anyway, so I started driving north on a long, windy, deserted highway. Since it was October, the sun was getting in the habit of setting around 6 p.m., and it wasn't long before it started getting dark. After all the crazy shit that's happened to me on lonely back roads at night, you'd think I would be a lot more anxious than I was, but these experiences were truly few and far between. My guard was down, I was just cruising along, enjoying the sunset and listening to the radio. There were only a few country stations that could be picked up out here, but I wasn't really paying attention to the radio. I always let my mind wander when there isn't much to be seen from the driver's seat. I can't remember exactly when things started looking different, but I did notice when the radio turned to static for a few seconds. I felt this shift. I don't know how to describe it. It was like I'd just gone through a pocket of space without air or matter, just nothingness for a split second, and the radio static. Suddenly the radio turned back on, and things felt normal-ish again. I was about to shake it off when I heard what they were saying on the radio. President Clinton made a statement to the public yesterday, claiming that she had every intention of opening an investigation into the Epstein claims. More on that at 11. Thanks for listening, users, and now back to the regularly scheduled music block featuring Dash. I turned the radio off. Did that just say President Clinton and she? That's not possible. I quickly tapped on my phone screen that was sitting on the mount on my dash to make sure I hadn't gone through time or something. The date was still correct, still 2019, but I no longer HD service. That wasn't unusual, especially for where I was. Maybe I just heard it wrong, I thought to myself, and kept driving. I tried to focus on the road and my immediate surroundings, which were all nearly pitch black now. Due to the setting Sunday, I can't recall when I first noticed a vehicle behind me, but at some point I looked in my rearview mirror and saw headlights. My truck wouldn't go above 68 miles per hour, and I was on a flat, 2-lane highway where the speed limit was 75. I figured whoever it was would pass me soon, as there was nothing coming. I didn't like cars behind me at night, they always blinded me. When I was in training for this job, they told us about how to control the space around your rig, which basically means if you don't want someone behind you, just slow down and they'll pass. So that's what I did. I slowed down and hoped they would pass. They didn't. I slowed down some more and tapped my brakes a few times, hoping they would get the hint. I was down to 55 miles per hour and they still hadn't passed. Normally, I would just say to hell with it and keep driving, but I think this guy had his brights on, so it was starting to really bother me. I saw ahead there was a small dirt pullover area. I thought it would be best to turn off and let him pass, something I normally didn't do because I just don't give a fuck, but as I said, he was blinding me. I put my blinker on and slowed down until I dropped off the edge of the road and came to a stop. I didn't bother pulling my air brakes, as I assumed they would only take a second to pass. The lights stayed behind me and slowed down, creeping right up next to me. I got a very uneasy feeling. I was in the middle of nowhere, and God knows what this guy wanted. Maybe he just needed directions. No, Brittany, I thought to myself, that's how people get kidnapped and end up in a ditch. Just stay in your truck. If I thought I could outrun them, I would have, but these trucks aren't exactly the best getaway vehicle. I knew I wouldn't be able to if I tried. I made sure the doors were locked and pulled my brakes, in case I had to get in the back quickly. I turned my head to look at the approaching vehicle. It was now right beside my cab. It was a jet black van with heavily tinted windows, exactly the kind that would try to kidnap a lonely woman off the edge of a deserted highway in the middle of Texas. This didn't make me feel better. It just sat there for a moment, and I had no idea if there was someone in there staring at me or not. I put my hand up and waved them past, hoping they would just move on, but still they sat there. I looked at the passenger side window, and then a face suddenly presented itself to the glass. It scared the hell out of me. It didn't look like a normal human's face. The nose was flattened. It reminded me of Voldemort's snake-like nose. The eyes were wide open and fully white, no pupils or iris to be seen. Worst of all, they had their mouth open, much wider than it should have been. Their thin lips were suctioned to the glass, and I could see their sharp teeth jutting out of the gums. They flipped their tongue around on the glass, as if tasting it, and looking right at me the whole time. I was completely unsettled by this disturbed person, licking the glass and staring at me. It made me wonder who was driving the van, and what they might look like. I didn't want to find out. I had no idea what to do. If they chose to pursue me and had a weapon, I wouldn't stand a chance. They'd never be able to force my huge truck off the road, but what if they shot my tires out? I hesitated, frozen by indecision, until finally the van started moving. The rolled past me slowly, the strange man keeping eye contact with me the whole time, his face still pressed against the glass. It pulled back on the road and sped off, leaving a cloud of dust behind them. The only thing I saw as they left were several pairs of white, glowing circles from the back windows. The radio crackled to life and the sound was so loud it made me jump. Didn't I turn that off? Chills ran down my whole body, and I felt that strange shift in reality again. Just as suddenly as it started, it was over, and things started to feel normal again. Looked ahead into the small bit of land I could see in my headlights. The dirt, rocks, and shrubs looked normal again. I could have sworn the last several minutes they looked just wrong. I'm not sure how to describe it. I couldn't stop thinking about that van. I wonder where it had gone. I hoped I wouldn't run into it again. I pulled back onto the road and continued driving. I realized that the van was nowhere in sight. It may have been a minute since it left, but I could see ahead of me for at least several miles. It was flat, and my headlights reached far out. It's like it just disappeared. I can't decide if that made me feel better or worse. I tried to put the strange incident out of my mind and keep driving. It wasn't long before I reached my stop for the night and bedded down. I felt better being surrounded by people, safety in numbers mentality, I suppose. However, as I was walking back to my truck, I could have sworn I saw a noseless face, mouth wide open, staring back at me from another truck a few rows down. I blinked, and it was gone. I'm really tired of weird shit happening to me in the desert. I deliver meat as a truck driver. I must always stay away from those predators. As far as I remember, I've always been fascinated about road trips ever since I was little. The factor of such definitely came from my dad, who once worked as a truck driver and would often bring me along with him. Now being grown up and all, those sweet memories eventually faded along with time. The last time I graduated was nearly a decade ago. All the jobs that I took were merely a part of an inconsistent, unpleasant career that barely supported my financial burden. Being nearly stuck in a dilemma, I finally decided that it was time I find a stable career with a job that I actually enjoy. Fast forward to a few months after, I couldn't be much happier to have finally possessed a competent truck driver's license after digging out my remaining money for the lessons. The moment I took hold of it, I did not waste time to seek for companies that would hire me. It took some quick browsing before I found a small unnoticed company that offered good bucks. It introduced itself as a meat company and desperately needed new drivers as demands were increasing lately. I partook in an interview and sure enough, secured the job since they were unexpectedly that desperate. My orientation was right on the next day. Prior to it, my new boss ordered me to sign some terms and contracts and handed me a set of documents, which he described it as the company's rules and regulation. Since the goods I transport are fresh meats, it means that I had to drive midnight carrying them from the factory to its destination before morning for the public to purchase and consume. The orientation went smoothly, and I quickly adapted to the lifestyle of a trucker within days. During my first few days as an amateur, I was accompanied by my supervisor who observed my driving. He told me that it was a protocol for a driver to be accompanied along the ride, but most of the time I would have to be alone due to worker shortages. Therefore, driving solo wouldn't be an uncommon thing in this company. Well, it was pretty awesome driving around late night, enjoying the night view, although I still needed to arrive on time. Other than that, I was coping with the job really well. One usual night, as I arrived to my company to start my job, I was greeted by my slumbery boss, who told me that I needed to handle today's delivery alone. I glared at him momentarily before nodding and walked toward the six-wheeled rigid fridge truck that I've been working on. It was my first ever solo. The engine of the truck roared alive as I turned the key forward. The headlights illuminated the wall in front of me with such brightness that I had to look away momentarily. Next thing, I shifted the gear and drove towards the loading bay as I was taught. The ramp gradually opened as I pressed one of the buttons, exposing cool nitrogen gas out into the already cold atmosphere. Sounds of rumbling faded in as a forklift carrying meat packages unloaded into the container, creating bangs and impacts which shook the truck and me inside of it. As soon as I heard a familiar tap pattern, I instantly recognized it as a signal and shut the ramp close. It wouldn't take long before I exited the factory and took the main road. The GPS voice made an indistinguishable announcement: your journey to Joe's Meat Market, Oregon is 179 miles northwest. Have a safe drive. Initially, I drove through residential areas before passing by farms and factories. It wasn't until I had to make a turn into a smaller road which would cover the majority of my trip. The streetlights weren't well lit, which gave the road a gloomy appearance. As I advanced for 30 miles, streetlights no longer covered the roads, and all that was left illuminated was the headlight of my truck, the dashboard, and the glittering stars across the sky, and on occasion high beam lights from passing cars. All around me were lush, thick forests, making the surrounding extra darker. The truck's engine's vibration as it cruised down the road shook my body throughout the drive. Staring at the illuminated road, I couldn't stop myself from thinking the set of special rules that I have read earlier. Special rules. In this section of rules, it is obligatory for every worker to abide every rules that were listed. Failure to do so will almost guarantee a life-threatening hazard. This version covers special rules for long-haul truck drivers. Rule 1. As you are operating as a night shift driver, it is obligatory to keep the headlights on at all times, especially on dark roads, even when your truck is stationary. This might sound simple but extremely important for safety reasons. As I recalled such rule, I wondered why was it in the special list when it was a literal common sense in the real world. I took a turn at a sharp corner and accelerated the truck. As I stepped on the pedal, I recalled the second rule. Rule 2, if you are driving in a remote area, abide the traffic rules if there are vehicles nearby. However, if you are completely alone, try to cruise at a higher speed as to quickly avoid unwanted visitors. The last phrase sent chills down my spine. What the hell was a visitor? I mean, who wants anything from a meat truck? That was when I jerked on the brake pedal in a sudden as a figure quickly approached ahead of me. It was a person who seemed lost. Thinking of the following rule, I did not stop the truck and instead swerved and overtook him. Rule 3, never allow anybody to ride on the truck, even stranded or lost people. Failure to do so will result in an immediate disqualification from this company if you're lucky enough not to fall into its trap. Staring at the rear view mirror and the dashboard camera, I couldn't help myself but curse under my breath. Why not? This was getting frustrating. Just a few minutes after the incident, a yellow indicator popped out on the dashboard. Something I really wish hadn't happened to me right now. The truck's engine compartment began filling with smoke, and traces of it escaped through the crack of the hood, forcing me to halt the truck. Apparently, luck couldn't get any worse as the engine overheated in the middle of a creepy forest. Water coolant was running low, and so I stepped out of the truck to grab the water jerry. As I opened the door, a cool breeze blew over my body, sending chills within my body. I embraced myself and shone the torchlight towards where I was facing. I clumsily waddled to the side of the truck, both legs still cramped from the tedious driving. Then, I pulled a trigger which opened the hood of the truck. I could feel the heat radiating onto my body from the overheated engine. I took a quick break before pouring some water into the coolant tank. I left the hood open for some time while I chilled inside the cabin. It was then that I realized my delivery had to be inevitably delayed. It took almost half an hour for me to be confident enough to continue the journey. As I stepped outwards again to shut the hood, something bizarre happened. The same guy that I overtook a while ago appeared behind my truck. Completely dumbfounded but somehow expecting it, I glanced towards him as he slowly approached me. He was in his 40s, had brown hair and appeared to be dirty and torn, and looked emotionless. In a deep monotone voice, he asked, "Why did you not stop just now?" I hesitated for a while, before replying, "Sorry, but company doesn't allow us to pick up strangers. In the middle of nowhere, and you think it's okay for me to be alone here? Look, I'm sorry." I stuttered. But a car suddenly drove past us, its high beam distracting my view on that guy. I covered my eye with my arm. As I put my hand down, the guy seemed to be gone. Then suddenly he was at my side. My heartbeat skipped, but I remained in composure. "What are you waiting for? I'm not letting you go this time." His face began to show irritation. "All right, just stay here while I get things done." I walked to the front of the truck to shut the hood, all while shivering from the sudden change of aura that this guy gave. I quickly stepped into the cabin and instinctively shut the door, barricading myself from the man outside, and activated the locks. The click on the door as it locked was something I anticipated so much that it gave me a quick sigh of relief. The man appeared beside me, now knocking on the door, probably wondering why I locked myself in. Or maybe not. My heartbeat raced as I rushed for the keys and ignited the engine. The rumbling came again, but I was so grateful that I could feel it again. I instantly shifted to first gear and accelerated ahead. The guy's yell and knocking was suppressed by the loud diesel engine, but I could already imagine him cursing as he banged on the truck. As the truck gained speed, the banging shifted all the way to the back of the truck and then came silence. That was when I heard a bone-chilling scream. That was not a human scream. It sounded too unearthly. My primal instinct could sense evil behind the deafening roar. I glanced at the rear of my truck, only to visualize a traumatizing silhouette which was now chasing me. From what I could see, it stood 6 feet tall even with all 4 of its legs. Its appearance was too dark, but I could definitely notice a darker patch of eyes staring into my side mirror, right into my soul, its serrated row of teeth hungry for flesh. The figure approached rapidly as the truck's rear light illuminated the unearthly creature in red. I could hear bangs on the side of the truck. It was attempting to breach the container. I brake-checked unexpectedly, making the creature unable to react in time and tumbling onto the asphalt. I accelerated harder this time and fled the scene. That was when another rule popped into my memory. Rule 4: if something is following you, do not let them catch up to you. Do your best to survive. Something? Is that creature the something they're referring to? I tried to connect the dots while simultaneously focusing on the road. Adrenaline was rushing endlessly when all of a sudden, a horde of the similar creature flanked from the side of the road. My jaw dropped as I was flabbergasted by the sudden attack. I swerved to avoid them and hit one of them. I felt a huge crash, but the truck kept on going. Series of bangs and clanks reverberated the truck's chassis as the container was constantly ambushed mercilessly by the creatures. Couldn't think much of a solution as they gradually broke in. I couldn't thank my luck more as a tunnel approached in front. Taking this opportunity, I swerved right and took down 3 to 4 of these creatures off the truck. I could hear the splatter noise as they were brutally crushed between the truck and the tunnel. I did the same at the left side of the truck as I crossed the double line and skidded against the tunnel. The creatures at the other side were also ruthlessly obliterated. The tunnel ended as the last creature's body laid onto the ground from the devastating blow. I celebrated momentarily, punching the steering wheel as soon as I exited the tunnel. I drove for another 5 miles, still high on adrenaline. I did not notice the sharp curve in front of me, and the massive truck battered into the woods as I couldn't react in time. The truck was too fast. I was running for my life. The truck came to a complete halt, jolting me forward like a dummy rag doll. I cursed under my breath. I just thanked that my seatbelt saved my ass. I shifted into reverse gear, but horror dreaded upon me as I realized that the RPM was at its maximum. This only meant one thing. The wheels were stuck. Fuck, I screamed in panic and in pain. I scanned around me. No vehicles were around. I was completely left alone. I felt hopeless by then. I already called my boss, and he promised to send a tow truck as quick as possible. I hid in my truck for about 15 minutes now. I don't think they'll ever make it. I can hear the creatures from a mile away now, approaching at an alarming rate. Thank you for joining me on this chilling journey through the darkest corners of the internet. If you enjoyed getting spooked, be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell for more bone-chilling adventures. Remember, the darkness never rests, so stay tuned for more terrifying tales with Haunted Hilda.